Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Who We've Become. Today's guest, in honor of Women's History Month, I have my friend Erica here from how long have we known each other? Since about seventh grade, I
Seventh
believe.
grade,
You
years
and
old.
yeah. I was talking with Sarah about it too. I think that's like 25 years, a little over 25 years. So
I know
we're kind of aging ourselves there.
we are. I know.
But
40. I don't know about you though.
yeah. No, yep. Just turned 40 a couple weeks ago. So
Oh, there you go.
getting up there. This is our year though. That's why 24 is so special for a lot of us. You're doing a lot of these podcasts, and then I know you have something special going on coming here in 2024.
You.
We've had a lot of, I mean, not just myself. I know you had some hectic things. Well, more like a finding yourself in 2023. And so we're all now turning 40, and it just seems like a lot of us have some light bulbs going on. So today we do have kind of lately based on my conversations with Erica just before this podcast, it may get a little emotional. We're both married. We both have kids. And so I was reading about Erica's story prior to the podcast, and it's a very tough one for someone to go through who's been married. So it was a process that she went through. It was kind of a shock to her system, to her whole family life. And I'm gonna let Erica talk about it, and we're gonna just go from there. And we'll try to jointly keep it together, and hopefully give our audience some bits and pieces that they can take away when they're coming into some struggles. So why don't you start us off with roughly about the year that it happened, and then kind of talk a little bit about what happened and where it kind of put you guys, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Brandon. I really appreciate it. This is the first time I'm talking about it, so I do apologize if I get emotional. And I should have grabbed tissues now that I think. Um, it's okay. Yeah. So I wrote an article that was published last year, and it's based on my husband and my story. Um, in May 2020, right on, the brink of COVID and everything. He had a work accident. He was up in Las Vegas doing testing. It was 110 plus degrees. It was hot. He wasn't acclimated. And something happened where he got severe heat stroke, but they couldn't get him down in time with the other person who was doing the testing. And so, in addition to heat stroke, with the heat coming off the glass, it was an extra 20 degrees. So he received brain damage. I'm not sure the percentage of brain damage. Also, rhabdomyosis, which is the process of your organs trying to survive by literally pulling your heart trying to survive by literally pulling nutrients out of your organs, and it puts protein in your blood and literally kills you. But it's trying to keep you alive. So he had brain damage, rhabdomyosis, and heat stroke. And at first, he didn't really know what was going on. He thought he had heat stroke. There was some issues with work there that I'm not going to talk about, but he ended up in the hospital. He had severe chest pain, and they did panels, and they're like, "Oh my God, you have rhabdo. You could die from this." He was treated for 4 to 5 days, and they told him that he would recover in 4 to 6 weeks, but it's almost 4 years and he still hasn't recovered, which is crazy.
Is this when So when they said that he would recover, were they talking about recovery from the brain damage, or is that
I
something that they looked at as more permanent and he may recover from other stuff? Because that's gotta be, I mean,
Yeah,
it's pretty much like his whole body was, for lack of and excuse the language here, his whole body was fucked by that
yeah,
whole thing.
yeah. And
So
unfortunately, first went into the hospital, they only treated the rhabdo and the heat stroke with fluids and all kinds of things. They didn't scan his brain until 4 months later. So that was part of the issue where they didn't know. Yes, it's crazy. So they didn't know he had brain damage until later. And I think that probably hurt his recovery as well. So I think the time frame they gave us was probably recovery from rhabdo and heat stroke. And they said he might have some issues being in the heat, playing with the kids in the full sun, because we do live in Southern California, right? And tops of July, August, somewhere around 100-ish, 104 at the hottest we've had, right? And so we're like, okay, we can deal with that. Maybe he'll just be inside a little bit more. But as a result, he was in bed from the minute he got home from the hospital. He had horrible migraines. His disposition had changed because obviously he's in pain. He was on really, really strong medication that gave him a really strong odor, to say the least. But he also, the pain he was under changed him, and also the brain damage, because when you have brain damage, frontal lobe and everything, it affects your ability to process, your ability to react, your ability to control emotions, anger, your fight and flight. There's so much of that in there that was damaged, where he would literally respond very quickly without thinking, or forgetfulness is huge. So he doesn't remember that I packed the kids lunch still sometimes. But back then he forgot everything short term was gone. So I tell him one thing, like I asked him to pack my son's lunch when they finally went back for COVID, I think in October. And I guess he didn't. And I got a call from the school saying that his lunch pail's in here, but it has old food in it. And I started crying, and I was like, oh my God, my husband forgot. But it was more than that. It was that he literally couldn't comprehend and retain that information. And now he's definitely getting better. I don't know the percentage he has. We're still dealing with workers' comp and battling that, which is a whole nother enchilada, and seeing more specialists. But I think the whole purpose of me writing the article, getting back to the article, is that with his accident, it changed our marriage. We say when you take our vows, I take you in sickness and in health, till death do us part. But I've had aunts and cousins who have had cancer and watched that horrible disease and them heal from it, and an aunt pass. But having my husband change mentally and physically, he lost all his muscle. He was very physical. He was a CrossFit athlete. He was a firefighter before. He lost 50 pounds of muscle. So they put him on testosterone, and he became literally a raging Hulk in our house with our 2 young children. And I literally had to give him timeouts. We had lots of talks, lots of fights. And the sickness changed him so much that he was unrecognizable to me, and literally started driving a wedge between our relationship. And that was really difficult because I loved my husband incredibly. We had COVID going on. He was sick. I was and am still the full-time provider. Our kids were at school and at home. Like, it was a lot, and I needed support, and he couldn't provide that. But even more, like, he just mentally wasn't there. He was super depressed. There was times when he would say something to me and go upstairs or leave the house, and I honestly didn't know if he would come home or he would return, because he was very suicidal. Because he couldn't do anything, he was in pain, and just, for lack of a better term, he was damaged, and he wasn't the man he knew and recognized. There was definitely bits of my husband. I mean, he's still Charles. He's still good with the kids, but his temper would flare quick. He was super snappy, and my husband's very kind. He was raised with a single mom. He's very protective. He's super silly. He's like the strong, tall, silent type. He's got tons of tattoos, but he's like the sweet, tough guy, you know? And all that was left after the accident, at least the first like 6 months, was this angry person, and very emotional, depressed person. And so it drove a wedge between us. I read a bunch of memoirs to help me get through. I read some romance to help me. I talked to friends, but I wanted to be a warrior for him. But at the same time, I didn't know if we would be able to get over what had happened to him, and, be the couple that we needed to be for our family. And I sat down and had some really deep thoughts with, and wondered if our marriage was going to last, if this was going to be the divider. I wasn't happy. I was super lonely. We weren't touching, we weren't kissing, we weren't even hugging. We barely spoke to each other because lots of times ended in arguments. And we're not an argumentative couple. So it was just very different, and one day I sat down on the couch with him, and there was literally 3 cushions between us. And before this accident, like, my husband was always like right next to me. I call him the human heater. Like, he's a cuddle bear too. And it's just the distance in the couch was just so symbolic. And of our relationship. Like we had distanced so much that we were now literally roommates that were barely talking. And I mean, we're there for the kids, obviously, but our relationship had dwindled to a part where I literally was wondering if I could be a single mom and be happy. But I feared that if we did get divorced, that he might take his own life. So that was a big consideration. At the same time, like I wasn't ready to give up our marriage. We had celebrated 9 years before his accident, and so I literally, had to talk with him, and I said, "Do you want to be married?" Because I hadn't felt that he wanted to be married in a very long time, and he said yes. Like I don't want to give up on us, and so I said the same thing. We talked through some very difficult topics and subjects, and we finally hugged. And it was just like, the embrace was so important to me, and it just felt like that was the first piece of the puzzle of putting back together our marriage. And from then we decided to work on it. We talked to our pastor, who we hadn't even told we were close to breaking. Like, pastor's wife and I were very close, and she was like, "I didn't know you guys were close to divorcing. You guys didn't say anything." I was raised in hospitality. My mom had a really successful wedding business for 30 years, and we were trained to put on happy faces. And that's what I did. Also, my husband, he was very ashamed of his condition, and he didn't want me to tell anybody. So I didn't tell anybody for the first 6 months what had happened to him, which was a lot of extra strain on myself too. But once I started telling a few friends, they're like, "Oh, that's where you've been. You've been taking care of him and your kids, obviously, right? And working and trying to stay above water." But we talked to our pastor. He joined a DNA group, going over Bible studies every week and finding that community that he needed. A lot of his friends had dropped away, and still most of them haven't returned because he wasn't Fun Charles anymore. He couldn't go out to bars. He couldn't go fight. He couldn't do a lot of stuff. He still can't. So now he has a really close network of friends, but he lost a huge percentage of friends and friendships, even super long-term friendships over this. But we slowly worked on putting our marriage back together. We had simple date nights because we couldn't afford anything. We were, down to workers' comp pay, and California is expensive, and I was main provider. So we had simple, Connect Four date nights, and we watched some in-home concerts and did some little things and played Scrabble. And I asked him to make sure he was going to be there more for the kids. So we started doing like some fun stuff for the kids inside, or early in the morning hours when he could watch them out in the front yard, or in our cul-de-sac, watch them ride bikes. And my daughter had this cute little slug she used to push around, so he could watch her a little bit. But I just asked him to be more present. That was a big thing. And so we both decided to be more present in not only our marriage, but with our family. And we conquered. Like, I thought we were going to get divorced, and we didn't. So in 2021 we celebrated our 10-year anniversary, and this year will be our 14th. So we made it. So
Wow.
yeah. Whew, I'm sorry.
And that's
Talked about this.
oh no.
So for me.
No, me too. Cause like I said, the point of the podcast is not so much the story as much as the emotion.
Yeah.
And I think about how your husband felt, and sorry, now I'm getting emotional too. I think about how I felt last year. Completely different story. I'm physically healthy. I had years of experience in the field that I studied, but I couldn't find work. I was struggling. I couldn't make ends meet. It was the same thing. Our date nights were little to nothing because we couldn't afford it. And I remember that the feeling of helplessness, and just the wanting to be there for the kids, and wanting to be there for my wife, and just the mental struggle. And I can only imagine, on top of his mental struggle, the additional added piece of there is a mental struggle, right? Because he has the brain damage, and he's trying to bring that back. And so it's got to be rough, because like I said, I remember there were days like that where I had the same conversation with my wife, and it was monetary.
Yeah.
and the struggle to just kind of fight through it. And I'm curious, the moment that you were on the couch
Mhm.
and he basically said he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to get a divorce. He wants to stay together and he wants to try and make it work. The the conversations that came after, were they were they much more positive, or has he still are does he still have a lot? I mean, kind of, I guess the weight scale, right? Does he have more good days than bad, or does he have more bad days than good,
Yeah.
based on kind of things? Because I know when shit was really bad for us, I had hell of a lot more bad days than good.
Yeah.
And then when I really, it was really kind of when 2024 started and I really wanted to turn the page. I wanted to help others. I wanted to kind of get these type of stories out there, that I started having more good days than bad, because I started getting back to myself and my type of personality, which was helping others. I really like getting messages out there. And when I was going to certain meetings continuously, I always liked sharing my story and talking to people. So have you seen him kind of turn to a more positive aspect on life now that things have turned around, even though he's still struggling in a lot of areas? And if you have, what do you kind of attribute that to?
That's a good question. He definitely has more good days than bad now. He was able to get a part-time job last fall where he works severely part-time hours at local grocery store where it's very cold in the meat department. He told me he had to suck up his pride because he wanted to provide for our family, and even though it's not as much as anything close to what he was making before, because obviously it's extremely part-time and it's a lower paying job, it helps. um, because I try to write articles and make extra where I can, but there's only so much I can do. I already have a full time job. I write books too, but the publishing process is a long time. But back to your point, he does have more better days. I think what has helped is that he found God again, um, and he has a really good relationship now. I think he blamed God a lot for what happened to him. He had a really rough childhood. At a young age, learned to take care of himself and his brother, and didn't have much. And so I think having to start all over again was very hard, especially as a provider and a man. But definitely talking to our pastor, getting back into the word, finding the friends in the community that could really support him. He has a group in our church, and one of them actually had brain surgery. So this man is really relatable to my husband, and it's really helpful for him when he's having some tough days too. But I think just really having the support. He knows I support him, indefinitely, but also accepting that this is where he is now, and it can only get better because 4 years, almost 4 years ago, he was at rock bottom physically and mentally and emotionally, and he's doing so much better now. He's able to help my son at the baseball field a little bit, stay in the shade, obviously, sit down. He can throw the ball a little bit. But he also calls himself the house husband because he can help around the house. So what he can do, he does with pride. And I think just being thankful that he can still be the awesome dad that he really always has wanted to be a dad, and a husband. That's one of his main goals in life, is to be a great dad and husband. I think he's doing great.
And what about those, I guess you can say, 6 months
Yeah.
where you had said that he had asked not to tell anybody. And so
Mhm.
you just kind of kept it internal.
Yeah.
What were you thinking about? What were you kind of going through mentally and emotionally to help you not just get through those 6 months, but after you started talking to people, when you'd get into certain situations, like when you guys would get into fights or whatever, a lot of people can't relate to you because a lot of people haven't gone through what you've gone through. So, what are your almost daily processes? In that first 6 months when you couldn't talk to anybody, but now kind of what is your outlet when you get into certain situations with him to just kind of decompress, remind yourself where you guys have been, where you've come from, where you are now, and kind of just talk about how you get through the day-to-day processes in just that first 6 months, but more focused on how you get through today.
So the first 6 months after his accident, I couldn't tell. He asked me not to tell anybody. I mean, my sister knew, my twin sister. She's
Mhm.
there every single day, and she's a fantastic support, and she was there for me. My mom obviously knew, but nobody else. I mean, I told my other best friend, Madison, I think a couple months later, and she was like, "What? Why didn't you tell me? I could have been praying for you." And I think it was hard on my husband to tell people who he was and what happened to him, but it was even harder for me to keep that secret. So I literally had to get up early, which I still do. I get up at 5 and I did some yoga, or I listened to some music, or I did prayer and devotional. That helped me a lot. I go through walks. But there was a lot of stress on me because I had to be the upbeat parent for my kids. I had to still perform at work as a top performer. I still had to be wife and stay positive for my husband. So there was just, I felt like I was kind of thrust in the positive bottle, which I've always been a very positive, happy person. But I started having really bad anxiety attacks and panic attacks, which I had in my early 20s, before I was diagnosed with a weed allergy too. But um, yes, I had a lot of panic attacks. And um, finally, I was like, okay, I can only control what I can control. So if my kids want to do XYZ and I was too tired, I would say, I can't do that today. But we can go in the yard and play in the hose and make hose rainbows, or we can go to the ducks and geese park and you guys can run up and down the hills. Just something simple. So I just had to acknowledge my limits. I think that was the biggest thing I had to do. Today is kind of similar because I still work full time. I still have my children, although they're bigger now. They're six, or no, sorry, they're 5 and 8. My husband's on the mend, but he still, after work, he needs to have quiet time. He needs to be in the dark to recharge. He needs to take naps. He's off 3 days a week, and those 3 days he sleeps 4 to 6 hours a day. He also sleeps 10 plus hours at night. So there's a lot of things I need to catch up on, but he's also great at helping clean up dishes when he can. He's the laundry put away. Um, we try to balance as much as we can. But my outlook is, when I get frustrated, it's mostly about workers' comp right now because we're fighting to get him the specialist to figure out what his state of health is currently and what we can expect for the future before we can settle our case. And it's just been a battle. We have a great lawyer, but
Mhm.
it's taken way too long, way too long.
Yeah.
And when that starts, building up, I'm like, okay, like, what are we thankful for? So we go around our table and our kids say what they're thankful for today. And then we pull out our phones and pictures and look at fun things that we've done as a family and remember the good times and try to push on, because honestly, there's so much good and we always have on it.
And how are the kids? Because I imagine they were, you said what, they're now 5 and 8.
Yeah. So my daughter was
S-
18 months when it happened, and my son was 5. Yeah.
so little young to
Or
fully remember everything. How are they now in terms of, or how do you kind of communicate your husband's situation to them in terms of, I mean, just going out and playing in the sun or summer vacations, and
it takes yeah.
how are those yeah, I mean with this situation, like how, because those conversations have had to be tough. I mean, again, not knowing the personal, not being through the personal situation, but I remember last year having the conversations with my kids of like, we're not taking a summer vacation just because we can't afford it, and that was just, that being alone is rough. But I can only imagine for you, like, it's pretty much any vacation that requires time in the sun is kind of out of there. Like, how do you go about your communicating that to your kids, and how are they taking it in this kind of situation that you guys are in?
I mean, I think they do the best they can, like we all do. My daughter wasn't old enough to remember my husband as the fun outdoorsy dad. She doesn't remember when he used to put her on his shoulders and run around the neighborhood, or put her in the bike and go for rides, or at the beach in the sand. She doesn't remember that, which is probably a blessing, because she knows him as daddy now. Like, he's her wrestle buddy on the couch. He will get down and play puzzles with her. Play-Doh. She loves art, so he'll sit there while she does art and he'll draw some stuff. My son remembers, though, and not as often now as before. He said, I wish daddy would get better so he can come to the beach with us, or he can go to the pool with us, or we can go ride 4-tracks at Mimi and Pappy's together, because he can't be outside when it's over 78 degrees. He literally can't be outside. He gets really bad migraines. He throws up. His whole body kind of shuts down, and he needs to lay down and decompress. And yeah, and when it's really hot, it's worse. But I think we're doing the best we can. I tell my son, I know you missed what daddy used to be able to do, but my husband loves playing catch with my son. So there's a little shady spot on the corner of our house by a little green belt in our community, and he can be there after school when it's starting to get cooler, like around 4 or 5. So there's certain things he can do, but there's definitely frustrations. Like, there's some meltdowns sometimes, like, no, I don't want to come inside. It's like, I'm sorry, it's too hot and I have to start dinner, and because daddy needs to rest, or mommy's tired and I have to go inside. Like, there has to be some sort of balance, and we can all throw tantrums, right? We're not perfect. Kids aren't perfect either. And I take it with a grain of salt, and I'm like, I understand you're frustrated. Tomorrow we'll be back outside. We can do this weekend. My sister and a couple friends will go to the beach together and have a beach day, so I'm not always flying solo. But I do feel like a single mom a lot. Taking them places, like I took my son wanted to go to Safari Park for his birthday, and I thought it was just going to be me and my kids, and my sister, my mom, my brother, and their kids all ended up coming. So it was like a whole family affair, which was nice. But yeah, anything outside, it's mommy, unless it's cool. The winter is the best months for my husband. But even still, if it's a clear blue sky and the sun is shining, it's still the UV rays that affect him. So he's always wearing a hat and sunglasses. Although you should really wear like one of those PE hats, those big wide brim.
Yeah.
I think it's like actor still, but he has one. He just needs to wear it. But yeah, my kids are great. I think they're doing the best they can, and they love Charles and he loves them, and they know that mommy needs to take them outside. And sometimes I'm like, aren't you tired of mommy? And they're like, no, we're not tired of you. Sometimes
That's
I'm
good.
like, yeah. And so he can take them to the library, somewhere quiet, indoor places, such as like we've been to Long Beach Aquarium. He just has to wear his earbuds because too much sound for him. It's hard to process. So he has to wear those. Or there's like the Discovery Cube we'll go to. Certain places he can go, but he still can't like walk super far, so he gets tired quickly. But we figured out the best we can.
And with, because I know you were talking about when you kind of started the story, you said that he would get better, or the doctor said that he would get better in 4 to 6 weeks, and it's been several years. Is the skin condition, or with the rays and the sun like that, have they expressed that is more of a permanent thing, or is that something that's lingering where you guys are like, when is this going to kind of subside? Like, what is that type of outlook?
I would like to know as well. We're still waiting on specialists. He hasn't seen his neurologist since October. He hasn't seen specialists in quite some time. So that's part of our battle with the lawyer and workers' comp right now. We're waiting to get an evaluation to see, to get full scans on his brain and his body. He has a checkup with his normal doctor that we pay for tomorrow through my insurance, but just for like an annual checkup. And we're paying for full blood work because he hasn't been feeling well. So we have to check if there's protein in his blood again. But yes, those are questions that we would love the answers to too. That's part of our frustration. But we also have a lawyer, so I can't go into too much about workers' comp frustrations.
Yeah. No, I get that stuff. We're going through some of our stuff from last year. So I'm trying to think of like the outlook. So nobody can obviously tell the future, but it sounds like your future, or based on your current lifestyle, is really based in faith and and kind of coalescing around your church and in your church group, and it sounds like it's worked for your husband. What can you kind of touch base? And I know we have probably about 10 more minutes, but briefly, can you kind of touch base as to what your guys's faith was like prior to his accident? And then obviously during, it's, I could only imagine. I mean, my frustration towards my faith was down in the dumps with just being unemployed. I could only imagine how angry he was.
Yeah.
Um, and you kind of discussed pulling out of it. But what was your kind of faith journey prior when you guys got married, prior to his accident, and then kind of take us through that very briefly to show how your how that little piece or those little nuggets that kind of stayed with you, just you were able to kind of hold on to them to make it through all this.
Yeah. Before we got married, I actually didn't belong to a church. I was raised Catholic, but the priests that we knew growing up all retired or moved on. They can only stay at their parish for so long. He was raised Protestant. We got married. We decided to find a pastor that could, give us some premarital counseling. He was Lutheran. He's hilarious. My mom knew him through the wedding business. Pastor Mark is wonderful. And he brings kind of the word with a lot of joy. Like he's always like, give a high five to God for the wonderful things he's doing in your life. And that kind of stuck with me. We were looking for a church. We went to my sister's for a little while, and then that was a bit of a drive because they're down South County. I'm in Orange County. And my friend Madison invited us actually to her son Ben's dedication. I think he was one. And we went to her church, which is called the Beacon, and we still go there today. And the pastor is a fire chaplain, and my husband at the time was a firefighter still. And he really connected with that. And it's a very wonderful small church. They don't put emphasis on like a location. Now we have a garden church, which is at one of our members' homes instead of like a big church structure. But just very welcoming, warm people, really family-based environment, and I really like that. And so we joined a DNA group and had Bible studies. And during COVID, obviously, all churches kind of went remote for a while, and that was very difficult, especially trying to keep kids like watch the camera and like look, you're
Yeah.
doing something cool. And my daughter's like, whatever's going on, drawing certain kind of thing.
Yeah.
But after we talked to our pastor and his wife, and started going to back to in-person church in the garden, it was beautiful and glorious. And I just remember hearing like the first sound of worship music, and I was like, okay, my soul needed this. Like I needed to be fed. I needed to have more of more Jesus in my life, and my husband did too. And I think when you have an accident, your first instinct is, why God, why this, why me, what kind of thing, and my husband definitely had that kind of battle and blamed the Lord.
Mhm.
Finally, he came out of it through a lot of trials, obviously. But God's got us, and we've had a lot of blessing these last 6 months. I'm having my first full-length book published this summer, and I'm so excited. I'm going to cry again, but yeah, I mean, we've been blessed, and I think not to celebrate the little things in life is, I mean, you do have to celebrate the little things in life. I forget what I was going there, but God is love, and he loves us. He loves my husband, and he's in control. So we just keep praying for him to move the paperwork for workers' comp, to heal my husband. And I don't know what the future looks like for Charles's health. I am positively hoping that and believing that one day he will be fully recovered. I don't know if that's in 5 years, 10 years, or 20, but I know he'll keep getting better. And, and I know that there's peace in that.
Well, that's good. That's good. So I know that we were uh, coming up on wrapping up here. So I have three pieces of, or three things that I would like from you.
Cool.
So first, I would like to give you the opportunity to plug books. I know you're an author. I know you've written several things. I want to give you kind of that opportunity because I feel that everybody's personality is always built into things that they do.
Yes.
So I think a lot of that it would be shown in your books. So that
Mhm.
would be the first. And then the second would be kind of like a two-parter of kind of words of wisdom, not just personal, going back to your struggles on getting through everything, but also marital and and any advice that you have or any kind of spiritual or faithful anecdotes that you might have that could help somebody out both personally who's going through a tough time, whether it be with a loved one or with work or something like that, and then or if they're going with some through something with a loved one, and how they can kind of get through those. So if you could kind of touch base on those few pieces here, and then we'll wrap it up. And I'll definitely at some point we'll have to carry on this a little bit longer because it's a lot of it's very interesting, and I'd like to kind of dig into it a little bit more, perhaps with your husband involved too, to kind of get both your brains on it. So with that, I'll kind of throw it back to you for those last few pieces.
Sure, I'll do my best. So I published a novella. It's a Christmas rom-com. It's a happy, fun rom-com. It's called Falling for Lemon Snowballs. It's like your Hallmark-esque happy neighbors fall in love story. She's a cookie baker, and there's all kinds of funny antics, and she gets stuck in a lemon tree, and actually based on my own experience. And
There you go.
and then of course I wrote this article. This article was really kind of a test for myself to see if I can share my story and be brave and connect with people and find healing for not only myself and others. And I was blown away when I shared it online during Thanksgiving, and people from work, strangers, people from school that I'd known a long time reached out, and um, it's just incredible. This one person, Caroline, I will not say her last name, but she's fantastic, said that one day your kids are going to look at you and tell you how proud they are of you and your husband for going through this and for coming out on top and for fighting for each other and our family. And I was like, wow, that's just incredible. So I'm, I'm very blessed that people have connected with that. And I'm finishing my memoir on the topic. It categorizes or catalogs our journey from when his accident happened to a year later, which was our 10-year anniversary. I'm finishing that up editing, and then I'll start querying agents with that. So fingers crossed on that one for publication soon. Yes, I'm going to
You
be
got
brave.
this.
Story. And then this summer, I have my first 5 books of a travel romance series coming out. It's called The Stars of Scotland. If you like Outlander, it's definitely influenced by Outlander. There's a single mom MC. She travels to Scotland, finds herself, connects to heritage, falls in love. She has a amazing best friend. The It's, the book is really about healing, and sometimes to find yourself you really have to leave, but she also has children, and so to remedy finding happiness within your new unit and an evolved unit is really important. I think that definitely has a little piece of my story in there too. But it's super fun. I take the reader from all the way from Edinburgh to Glasgow to the Highlands to the Isles, all the way to the northern coast, and back to LA. So it's a fun travel romance, great for summer reads. That'll be out this summer. You can follow my blog. I'm doing topics each month about it, and questions readers and bloggers have asked. I started my series in January, so you can catch up there. I'm sorry, what was the last one? Tips for
Anecdotes,
anecdotes.
tips
Tips
for
for
personal
okay.
personal struggle, and then marital.
Okay, great. So tips for personal struggle. Honestly, find your people. You cannot do any big you cannot succeed or overcome any big struggle or any big hardship alone. You need your network, your group, your family, your friends. And if you don't have that, reach out to a church, find people. There's a lot of people who are willing to help and be a part of your story and your journey, and provide support. Also, you need time to yourself, to decompress. Either exercise, walks are great, music's great, devotionals are great, whatever floats your boat there. And then advice for marriage. I mean, I've only been married 14 years, but if you don't want to give up, don't. You have to fight. You have to work hard. You have to dig deeper than you thought was possible, honestly. Oh, I hate that I'm crying. I'm sorry. Um, but also, like, decide what you want. If you want your marriage to work and you want to find happiness again, you will. You just have to put in the effort with your partner and decide that you're going to do it together.
Well, thank you. And I feel honored that you were willing to share your story via video and audio with me, and kind of take the blog that you wrote and bring it to life and bring a little bit more context to it. So I thank you for being on and appreciate it. And we'll definitely revisit this down the line and bring your husband on so we can really bring a lot more hope for people, because there are a lot of us struggling in a lot of ways. And but like I said, the emotional struggle is the hardest. And
It,
a lot of people don't focus on the emotional struggle, or getting help from the emotional struggle, because they listen too much to the story and they say, that's not my story. Ergo, I don't have to listen to it. When there are a lot of underlying emotional themes to it that really tell us that, yes, we may not have the same story, but we're all going through the same thing.
yeah, we're all.
So thank you. Yeah. So thank you again for being on,
You're welcome.
and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.